Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the 10 Ark creatures which I remember the most out of my 5 years of playing. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really does help out the channel. In at number 10 is the Pteranodon. Now the Pteranodon is one of the most memorable flyers in Ark, and it is one of Ark's icons. Showing up in one of the original trailers, I should mention. Yes, it wasn't in the original. The original had a T-Rex in it, but still the Pteranodon is a very, very well-known Ark creature, which is really nostalgic to me, and probably nostalgic to a lot of other Ark players as well. It definitely is not just me who thinks the Pteranodon is really, really memorable, as this was my first experience of flying in the game, gathering all of that chitin and keratin just to craft myself one saddle to get a Pteranodon to finally be able to fly in the world. And your first fly in Ark is definitely going to be a memorable one, as it is a huge step of progress in the game, even though if it doesn't seem like it at the time, it is an absolute monumental step to all of your Ark playing all the way into the future. The Pteranodon, also on top of all of that, is just a really great creature. Yes, it may not have the best stamina out there, or it may not have the best weight, but it still really does stack up in terms of speed, and in many PvP scenarios, the Pteranodon is the way to go for raiding bases. If you have a bit of C4, you can break into the base, but then you can quickly kill everyone and break everything inside with the Pteranodon's C-spin ability. And in PvE, you can also just use that thing for trying to zip across the map as fast as possible. And also you can use it occasionally for things like metal runs as well, except its weight isn't quite going to stack up to what you may want it to. Either way, the Pteranodon is an easy tame, so at some point, definitely go and get one. In at number 9 is the Baryonyx. Now this is by far one of the best creatures in Ark, except it isn't the most memorable creature to me, but it is definitely memorable enough and so good it deserves to be in the top 10, even though it isn't ranked so highly. And to some of my viewers, this may seem like an odd decision for me, as I do rant about the Baryonyx being some of the best tames in Ark a lot, but in terms of its memorability, it isn't the highest for me, but it is definitely a memorable tame, except it just came a bit later in the stages of Ark, which could have definitely hurt its rememberability. Either way, the Baryonyx is found in any swamp biome on any map. I'm pretty sure it does spawn on pretty much every map as well, especially on maps like Genesis Part 1 with its bog biome, where they are particularly annoying. But still, once you've tamed one, you've got all of that annoyance on your side, and you can annoy other players and other tames with all of that power that you gather from taming one of these things, and it is 100% worth the tame. The Baryonyx is pretty simple, especially now with the inclusion of the net gun, but if you do not have access to the net gun, you can always use some kind of trap. The Baryonyx is a very simple knockout tame requiring fish meat to actually tame it. You cannot use any kind of raw meat, which to many will be a big downside, but actually overall coelacanths really aren't that hard to kill, so it is not that bad. And in water as well, they have a special ability when you press C, and it will stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon, which is really OP, which actually makes it very good for underwater caves, but it really does shine in any cave. In at number 8 is the Argy. Now the Argy is by far one of the best creatures for doing any kind of metal runs and resource gathering altogether. It is definitely a huge standout, and it is still weird for me looking back on the Argy, as I remember its model looking very different. But the new model is definitely an improvement, and I really do not have any issues with the new model of the Argy at all. In fact, it does look significantly better than the original, but the original is really how I picture and remember the Argy in Ark. The Argys, when they came out, were absolutely insane, as you could level up so much speed and get around the map so quickly. and compared to the Pteranodon, they had the weight and stamina to go around, and also a lot more damage than the Pteranodon to really pack the punch, and they could pick up many other things in the game as well. Obviously they can pick up players like the Pteranodon, but other bigger creatures like the Ankylosaurus made this thing extremely useful, even before the Ankylosaurus had more abilities for gathering up all of that metal. Also, now the RG saddle works as a portable smithy, and it has a special secret ability which enables it to heal insanely quickly when it has eaten a dead body. In at number 7 is the Giga. Now when the Giganotosaurus came out, I fondly remember it from iBallistic Squid's video when they named this thing Tiny Tim. Definitely a very suiting name for a creature of this size and this immense power. And when the Giga came out, there was nothing that could match this creature at all. No creature was more powerful than it. It was just the beast of every Ark server and Ark world. And every PvE and PvP player simply had to get their hands on one of these things, no questions asked. The Giga was an absolute hunking beast that I think has been nerfed a bit since release, but I'm not quite sure about that. But still, at release, the actual rage feature of this was considered a cool thing, as this creature was of such power that it needed a rage meter, as this thing was too powerful and eventually it would lose control if it took too much damage. And many players really enjoyed that feature. Whereas now it's a bit of a nuisance, as many other creatures are more powerful than the Giga. But it definitely 100% worked in Ark stages back in 2016, when I think the Giga actually arrived in Ark. In terms of the Giga now though, it is still extremely useful for many maps like Ark Extinction for killing any of the many titans. Its only real downsides are its stamina is pretty rubbish, and also this thing should really not be carrying too much weight, as it can't really keep up with everything. In at number 6 is the Basilosaurus. Now the Basilosaurus is one of my only endeavours with the water in Ark, and I fondly remember this being the creature that I first went into the water with, as I really did not endeavour into any of the water areas into Ark until a lot further on in my progress, as the Basilosaurus didn't even exist when I first started playing Ark. I pretty much thought the Megalodon and that was it, and I did not want to go into the water in any kind of way. But when the Basilosaurus came out, I decided for once I would actually eventually hop into the water. And what a great water creature to start on. This thing is an absolute beast, and to this day is probably the best underwater creature for doing any kind of caves. Yes, it isn't going to do the most amount of damage in any way, and yes, it does take damage at the lower depths of the ocean, but this is still a creature to definitely be proud of, and definitely at some point tame. Apart from them being a passive tame, these things are 100% worth it and won't annoy you at all. In at number 5 is the Theri. Now the Theri is well known amongst many people, and this is really an iconic and rememberable creature among myself, as this thing looks very different to any other creature. This thing really does stand out for its amazingly long Freddy Krueger-like claws, and that is why sometimes I do call this thing Freddy Krueger, or my more popular name for it is Tickle Chicken. And actually, as another name to call a creature, I always call Titanoboas Danger Noodles. If you want to call them Danger Noodles in future, that is definitely a good recommendation. And a funny name for a creature in Ark is always welcome among many players. And a funny name usually does warrant to a creature that is insanely good and useful to tame. And the Titanoboa definitely was back in its day, except when the kibble system got changed, and now it pretty much has no use at all. But apart from talking about the Titanoboa, we're supposed to be talking about the Therizinosaurus. So, in terms of the Theris abilities, this thing is extremely good for killing the dragon boss on the island, and also this thing is insanely good for gathering things like berries, fiber, wood, and thatch. Its only real downside is because it's a herbivore, it can't heal quickly, so you'll need sweet vegetable cake. In at number 4 is the Yutyrannus, or sometimes I simply call this thing the Furry Rex, or the Ice Rex, I've heard it being called as well. Now, the Yuty for me is a really memorable creature, as this is one of the first creatures that I took into a boss, along with the creature that is next on the list after it. The Yuty really is a creature in Ark when it first came out. That was such a cool creature that simply no one would have thought of, and its abilities were really well known among many Ark players, as when it came out it was unlike any other creature before it. Now, if you didn't know already, the Yuty has two main roars. It has its fear roar, which will debuff the enemy, and also it does have a courage roar, which is the more popular one, which will buff your enemies and also debuff the enemy creatures on top of that as well, and that is insanely useful for many things, especially bosses and also PvP scenarios as well. It can be very useful if someone's trying to raid your base with a Pteranodon. You can simply just fear all them, and like that they are simply out of control and they can no longer pursue that raid of your base. A Yuty is a relatively easy tame now, especially with the net gun, and it is definitely one that you will need for bosses at some point, and is 100% worth the tame. In at number 3 is the Rex. Now, obviously the Rex would be on this list. The Rex is just one of the most memorable dinosaurs in the world, and it is the most popular dinosaur in the world among everyone. Pretty much every single person in the world who knows what a dinosaur is will know what a T-Rex is, as this thing is just the kind of icon or logo of what dinosaurs stand for. A big carnivore with big teeth, a huge head, and a big sweeping tail with many sharp claws and big wide feet with only 3 toes on them. But in terms of the Rex in Ark, this thing also, like the RG, had a different model when it first came out in the game, which was a bit more square than the model which we see today. And again, like the RG, the model we see today is significantly better than the one that was originally in Ark. But if you did want to check that out, you can always look on Google for Ark's old Rex model, and then you'll find out what it looked like down there. And you can also look up what the RG looked like as well. But either way, the Rex is by far the best boss creature in the game, as it is an extremely balanced carnivore, meaning it has a very high health stat, a high melee stat, and that is all you really need for fighting things. But on top of that, it does have a reasonable weight stat and an okay stamina stat, but again, those stats don't really matter for bosses. In at number 2 is the Bulbdog. Now yes, the Bulbdog came out well after Ark released, but still, this is by far one of the most memorable creatures for me, and Arboration is actually one of Ark's most memorable maps overall. The Bulbdog is just simply so like any other creature that came before it. It is absolutely insane, and it was insane to the people that saw it when it came out, I think back in 2017 or 2018, whenever Arboration dropped. But apart from its cuteness, it does have a great use as well. Reapers and also the Nameless on the map will be heavily debuffed if you have one of these things activated. And in at number 1 is the Carnotaurus. Now, all I think about when I do think of the Carno is the Carno that I had way back on my first Ark world, and also I do distinctly remember Carny Dave from Squid's old Ark series and all of those other Carnos that he once had. To me, the Carnotaurus was just the perfect creature, as I didn't feel ready to tame something big enough to be a Rex, but I didn't feel like going something as low as a Raptor. the Carno was really the middle spot for me, and I thought it looked so cool and also a little bit cute as well, as its arms are so comedically tiny you cannot help but laugh at its figure. But the Carnotaurus, since its release, has definitely been heavily buffed up, with its second ability now doing bleed damage, which really does suit it, as Carnotauruses were strong enough that if two bashed together, they could very, very easily bash straight through a whole safe. And safes are actually really strong, wouldn't you know? They are supposed to protect things. The Carnotaurus now is significantly better than what it was back when it came out in Arc, and that is really for the better. But still, the old Carno model, I think it did change at some point, yeah it did, the old Carno model really just does stick in my mind, and for some reason the Carnotaurus is just such a memorable creature to me. All of its body features and just all of the things about this creature with its teeth and its abilities really make this thing extremely memorable to me. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Also, comment your top 10 creatures that you found the most memorable in the description down below, and I will see you all later. Bye.